time for another podcast by George. Straight talk, straight from the heartland, that'll have you saying, by George, I think he's got it. Now, here's George.
Hello, hi, how are you? And welcome on into another podcast by George. As always, John Schaefer, thanks for that outstanding introduction. And of course, the music there by the great, the inimitable Bob Pace. A lot of his music you get to hear on the show. And we've got a good one today, a good show that is. Podcast by George. On the live line is our good buddy, our good pal, coming back once again, Dr. Stephan W. Schmidt. We're going to be talking about a lot of things. We're going to have some fun. This movie, Don't Look Up, that everybody's talking about. We're going to talk about that a little bit. We're going to talk about the future of the Iowa caucuses, or some people would say the lack of same. I want to mention briefly as we get into this, my major overall disappointment with the Progressive Caucus, particularly in the House of Representatives. We're going to take a look at the front page of the New York Times as it pertains to the situation in Ukraine. And if we get an opportunity, we're going to talk about the great Edward R. Murrow and the Red Scares that go back all the way to World War I. But let's talk about Dr. Stephan W. Schmidt. He earned a PhD in public law and government from Columbia University, New York, a long time ago. He's a founding and sustaining member of LULAC Council 307 in Iowa, one of the oldest Hispanic community and leadership organizations. He's very proud of that, rightfully so. He also served as the chair of the Iowa Governor's Spanish-Speaking Commission. He was born and grew up in Columbia, so he's got this really cool, unique perspective on America and U.S. politics. And, of course, he is the Lucan Endowed Professor Emeritus of Political Science from Iowa State University. So let's see if we can work our internet magic here and bring him on in. There he is. Good morning, Dr. Schmidt.
Good morning. Good to be with you.
Well, and as I mentioned at the top, we got a lot of things to talk about, Doc. So I want to get right to them. And one of them, if I can, I want to share this other slide. And I want to bring this up is this visual. Let's see here. There we go. That's Don't Look Up. That's this movie that really has caught the imagination and the interest of people on both ends of the political spectrum. Don't Look Up. And I gotta make an admission here before we get into this. I've watched half of it. It was kind of uncomfortable for me to watch, Doc. I got through half of it and I told my wife, I said, okay, let's stop here and then I'll come back to it. But here's my take on it. And here's the thing that I want to drive home to people. I'm watching this and I'm thinking to myself, this is a little over the top. I think they probably could have made just as compelling a movie if they had made it a little more believable. I thought it's just a little bit too much exaggerated, and it doesn't need to be. But then, and I'll show you why here very shortly. I thought to myself, well, maybe not. Maybe this isn't as much an exaggeration as we think that it is. And in reflecting upon it, I think actually it may be a hell of a lot more accurate than I thought when I quit watching it halfway through. What do you think of it?
Well, it kind of is a mirror that we look into and we see ourselves in 2022. It is the reality that a lot of people just don't want to believe anything. Science is no longer trusted, in part because some scientists, are not able to explain what they're doing, and some are not that great at what they're doing. The whole explanation of COVID and the constantly changing conclusions by, the CDC and Dr. Fauci and others, that's, scientists in this movie are trying to tell people, hey, there is an asteroid the size of the Empire, twice the size of the Empire State Building coming, and of course it's going to hit Earth. It's going to hit Earth and everyone is going to die. And a lot of people don't want to believe it. And there are political reasons for it. There are economic reasons for it, because some people just don't want to look up. And when they finally see the thing, they're saying, don't look up, because they want to say, this is just a bunch of leftist scientists and others that are trying to scare us. So there is a lot of reality in it. there is a lot of reality. And when you look at the news, the number of people who don't believe that the vaccines work and who are refusing them, I mean, they have the right to do it, and they, they are doing it. And so this movie is a combination of a lot of things. Yes, it's huge and it's fiction. It's not a documentary, George. It's not a documentary, so they can stretch out the the arguments. But I thought it was interesting. The scientists in this, who are basically astronomers and have tracked this, and they got all the numbers, but they don't know how to communicate what they're seeing and what it means to the average person. And I think, I work in the university, I just retired from it, but very often we in academia have all this great information stuff, and we just don't know how to talk to people, out there, in the big box stores and at the gas station and wherever, the dog park, which I love. People at the dog park are the nicest people, George. They listen, and we don't ever talk politics. But those folks, don't want mathematical equations, and they don't want mumbo jumbo. They want to know, well, what does this mean? And I think sometimes we're not very good at explaining it.
Okay, so and I agree with all of that. My criticism as I was watching it, as I mentioned, I thought, well, this is a little over the top. They're doing this for entertainment value. They don't really have to. They could dial this back a little bit, keep the same storyline, and it would be just as entertaining, because I'm not so sure this is realistic. Mm-hmm. But then, about the same time, this clip came out. It was on CNN. I don't know that a lot of people paid a lot of attention to this. Some people in Iowa did. I'm going to play this. And I want people to watch this, and then I want them to think about Don't Look Up, because this is really startling. Check this out now.
So Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell has said he does not feel that Republicans need to present an agenda to the country. And generally speaking, I understand the politics. Midterms tend to be referenda on the people who are running the country. But what are three things that Republicans will do if you recapture the Senate in the midterms?
Well, I think that Republicans stand for a strong, free, and prosperous nation. And so, one, we need to tackle the issue of inflation. Biden is facing a 40-year high with the inflation rate, and Iowans and all Americans are feeling those pressures. So alleviating those pressures on our families would be job number one. COVID as well. We need to make sure that American families have access to testing. But certainly we want to make sure that they are getting their children back into school and that their workplaces are safe and they can return to work. And then as well, we need to focus on additional things like foreign relations with our allies, because obviously with national security, we are under a lot of pressure right now. So Republicans believe in peace through strength. I certainly believe that, bolstering our military, but also making sure that we're using all of the other tools in our toolboxes to repair fractured relationships with other nations, engaging in trade, all of those things. That's what Republicans stand for. That's what I stand for. There's a lot of work that we can do, and certainly we can do much better than many of Biden's first-year failures.
Okay, Doc. So, I mean, I got to tell you something. If you look at that, now she was asked specifically what they would do, what the policies and programs of the Republican Party would be. She didn't answer that at all. Instead, she spoke in these nonsensical political terms. She had that goofy look and almost under medication grin on her face when she started. I mean, if you think of Meryl Streep, that character in the movie, it was a lot like this. And so when I think of, when I think about this clip, because, the Democrats are on the Republicans now. We know what the Republicans are against, and they've been against a lot of things in my lifetime. But the question that they're putting out there is, what are you for? What would you do? Let's get specific. Let's talk programs and policies. And she was asked exactly that. And just like Meryl Streep in that movie, she starts talking and you listen to her and it's like, what the hell? Did you not hear the question? Or are you just so into these talking points that basically is all you can say in response to any question? Now, I can play that clip later, but people just need to look at that, because that's reality versus the movie. And I got to tell you, Doc, they're not that far apart.
please remember that when politicians make very specific policy promises, they are always not able to meet them. Read my lips.
Yeah.
No new taxes.
8%.
George Herbert
8%.
Walker Bush.
I had Stephen Semler on. I don't mean to interrupt you, but to just drive home your point, he did an analysis, an accounting of what Biden has been able to deliver on thus far, and he's only a little over a year into his term compared to what he promised. Like you're talking about on the campaign trail, it's 8%. That's what he's done thus far. 8.
So my point is, if you're a politician, you don't want to get cornered where then the reporters are going to come back and say, you promised this, that, the other. You promised, that the COVID would go away and we would be back, in happy days. And that hasn't happened. You promised that, your spending to stimulate the economy was going to basically get America rolling again. And what is rolling is, in fact, inflation. And so politicians have learned, I think, not to be policy specific, but to paint a big picture. Remember Ronald Reagan? I mean, Ronald Reagan was shining city on the hill and dawn in America. The sun is coming up and the families are going, to work and their kids are going to school. That always works better than to make very narrow promises that you reporters, I'm not talking about you, George, but you reporters on CNN or anywhere else, you're going to remember that, and then you're going to play the clip where the politician promised something that they're not fulfilling. So that's unfortunately, I say unfortunately, that's the way, politics works.
That is the way it works or doesn't work in the respect. Nothing gets done, nothing gets promised, nothing gets delivered upon. There's no follow-up. There's no follow-up questions. I think Tapper did try to get her to name something, but she refused to do that a little longer in that clip. We won't play all of that. But the other thing of it is, I don't know if anybody, this goes way back in the day, but I know you remember probably, Doc, the movie The Stepford Wives. That's kind of what that reminds me of. I look at her and she's got that hypnotized look and that big toothy grin. And I mean, it just reminds me of the Stepford Wives. Well, let's go from fiction. Let's go from Hollywood to reality here. I'm bringing this up on screen. This is in the Des Moines Register recently, and this is something that the doc and I have talked about. Some Iowa Democrats are pushing for virtual midterm caucuses amid the COVID-19 surge. And of course, there are people in the Democratic Party that are pushing for an end to the Iowa caucuses completely. And this is the photo that, and Doc, I got to digress a little bit. You see that building there? Can you see that? Okay. I think that's the Democratic headquarters here in Des Moines.
I drive by it every time I go to the airport.
Airport, right. Now I've got a unique personal connection to that building. That building used to be, way back in the day, that was Connie's Skyliner Lounge and Restaurant. I was a busboy and dishwasher in there when I was 14 years old. I mean, we're going back to 1970, maybe 1971. Okay, Doc, I'm in the back of this building washing dishes one Saturday night, and all of a sudden the back of the building explodes. I turn around, and just probably 10 feet behind me in the kitchen is a Cadillac.
Oh my gosh.
And there's a guy getting out of the car, and I mean, he's so drunk he can't get out of the car almost.
Wow.
And he says, I lost complete control of the vehicle. And I mean, there's boards and splinters and debris and junk every place. And I mean, only missed me by about 10 feet or so. Yeah. So
George, can I tell you a story about that building?
Yeah.
I picked up a very prominent, famous campaign and political analyst at the airport and brought him up to Ames for a lecture. And as we came towards the building, going up towards Ames, I said, that's the Democratic Party headquarters. You know what he said?
Yeah.
He said it looks like the needle exchange place. Where the drug addicts go to exchange their needles. It is a horrible little building. If the Democratic Party wants that to be the representation of the party, it's just not not something that most people would respect.
Yeah.
George, that building should have been bulldozed after that Cadillac hit it. And the Democrats are there, and it is the symbol of the Democratic Party for a lot of people. Maybe that's good, that you're not fancy and you got this rundown old building. But myself, I think it's just kind of gives people the opportunity to trash the Democratic Party.
I'll tell you the ultimate irony of that building that goes back to the day there when I was there. That restaurant, Connie Skyliner Lounge and Restaurant, he had another building out behind. Now it's a dance place or a taekwondo studio or something like that. But anyway, he actually had people that worked for him that lived back there. They weren't supposed to. But he had his own world with that restaurant and lounge and his own employees. And it's kind of weird. And you've been around restaurants and bars and casinos and that type of thing. You can become a part of that. And to you, that's the whole world. And that's the way that it was to those people. Well, here we are, move ahead 40 some years or whatever to what it is today with these political parties and that being the headquarters of the Democratic Party. To those people, same thing. It's just like the employees sleeping in the building in the back. I mean, the whole world is that establishment, and it still is for a lot of people because, like you said, that's the headquarters. That's the go-to place for the Democrats.
Are there a bunch of Democratic activists sleeping in the back of the building?
I don't know.
I hope they're listening because they'd better get away from the back of the building because I heard that guy still has that Cadillac and is still going and drinking a bunch of booze.
He got out of there and he said, "Call my brother. Call my brother." That's what he wanted his brother to take care of it. Oh my God, did we digress there? Okay, let's move on here. I'm going to get to this. So here's the thing. This is how the register again. Democratic County Party chairs are pushing to move their midterm caucuses online amid tension with state party leaders and a surge in coronavirus cases across the state. Now, up in Sioux City, County Chair Jeremy Dumkeger said the party has chosen to hold their caucuses virtually, even though the state party has not officially sanctioned the move. He says, because the COVID cases in Sioux City here are getting really just kind of out of control, we decided that it was the best interest of everybody if we just brought them into a virtual caucus. Democrats have scheduled their midterm caucuses for February 7th. And that's kind of surprised me. The midterm caucuses are February 7th. I guess they're always about that time. Unlike, of course, that's 2022, folks. Unlike in a presidential year, these off-year caucuses are focused primarily on party building and grassroots organizing. The groups came together to discuss party business and elect leadership. And anybody that's been a part of any caucus kind of knows what that is. I tell people it's kind of like grade school. It reminds me of Mother May I, but that's what they're wanting to do with the the off year, the midterm elections for the caucuses. Doc, and I know you're uniquely again connected to New Hampshire because you're on radio up there, and you're Dr. Politics to everybody in New Hampshire as well. And there's a move to move the Iowa caucuses to a primary format, but a lot of people don't understand that probably can't happen because New Hampshire owns the rights to the first primary.
Right.
And then they're not going to stand for it.
And the way the thing has been structured is New Hampshire is the first primary. So Iowa cannot become a primary.
Yeah.
The Republicans in Iowa are not going to create a primary. They like their caucuses. They're not worried about lack of diversity and access and stuff. They got plenty of access and they run theirs very efficiently. So the results of the Republican caucuses, like the Democrats used to do, you have the caucuses, then the media is there waiting on presidential caucus night, and you give them the results. And, the media is already packing up. They've left their hotel rooms. They've got their airplane reservations. And they head for the airport sometimes the night that the Iowa caucuses are over because they've reported the results. That is what has to happen. So Iowa could improve the Democratic caucuses and make them more, let's call them more streamlined, less complicated. All this, dividing up into groups and all that, it's lovely. And that was nice for the last 50 years because I've been involved with analyzing these caucuses for 50 years, since the beginning of them in the early 70s, 72. But maybe 2024, you can change that a little bit. You can have some people access the caucus virtually, people who can't make it to the caucuses. We're all wanting everything to be perfection. And the last time around, they wanted perfection to the point where the caucuses collapsed. And that is politically much worse than having caucuses where some people maybe not be able to show up for them or participate. Not everyone can participate in these things. And the Democrats are also very concerned. The national Democrats, George, they don't like the Iowa caucuses because they've now discovered that Iowa has a very small minority population and that the caucuses are mostly a bunch of white people. That is, I'll tell you that right now. I've heard it from some people who are inside the party that are former students of mine and they said there's a lack of diversity and not enough Hispanics and blacks at the Iowa caucuses, and the access, it's too hard, it's too complicated. The turnout is low. I just looked at the turnout for primaries, George. It's very low. The turnout for primaries in some cases is not much greater as a percentage of the voting population, the people who are registered, than the caucuses. So to say that, it's too hard to access, the primaries, you have to go to a polling place. It may be when you're working. It may be, really far away from where you are. There may be a snowstorm. There may be horrible road conditions. And primaries are also very difficult for a lot of people. So why don't we just say we do the best we can, we get as many people participating as we can. If African American, Black, and Latinos and others in Iowa work really hard, they can get a good turnout. I know that LULAC worked very hard in the last presidential caucuses to get lots of Hispanics in Iowa to register to vote and then as Democrats and then go to their caucus. And they did. The turnout was terrific in the last one. And so the National Democratic Party has never liked the Iowa caucuses because, it makes other states second, third, and whatever. And I understand that. But all right, my conclusion is maybe this is when the Democratic Iowa caucuses should end and we do something different. But we cannot do a primary.
Oh, yeah,
because New Hampshire will sue us, and they'll raise hell.
Yeah, they got a lot of money invested in that too. They got a lot of money coming in. Yeah, that works very well for them.
The former chair of the Iowa Democratic Party is now the principal campaign consultant to the New Hampshire Democratic Party. So
go figure that.
He's not going to want Iowa to get a primary. So it's all insider politics. And as far as the caucuses this year, as you said, they are really just for party insiders. All you people out there are all hysterical. Those caucuses are for party activists.
All right.
They are, as you said, to pick issues that should be in the party platform, to talk about what candidates to support, fundraising, rules, all kinds of stuff. Most people would fall asleep and would rather have a root canal than to go to the off-year caucuses.
Yeah.
So don't get all hysterical. And for the party, the Iowa Democratic Party, my recommendation to you is allow virtual caucuses. I mean, we've got virtual congressional meetings and hearings and congressional trials in the courts. What is the Iowa Democratic Party so important that you can't have virtual caucuses? They're small, most of the people know each other, and you can do it. Get a Zoom, and you can do a very nice job, and you may even get bigger participation if you do it that way.
Yeah, it couldn't get much worse. Let me bring this. Oh, that's not the slide that I wanted to bring up. This is this is the last slide here, and this goes on. I'm not going to read through this, I don't think, because this has a lot to do with what the doc was talking about. I would say, in closing, I mean, I'll take the real leftist position on this, like I usually do. I kind of think these Iowa caucuses were imploding the last time around, not by accident, but by design. I think the Democratic Party doesn't like the Iowa caucuses, and well, they shouldn't, because I think for the last two presidential elections, Bernie Sanders has won those in Iowa. I don't think he got credit for them. I think they were kind of sabotaged in 2020, but I think that's the case. And like I said, I don't think it's by accident or design. I think, Doc, what'll save the Iowa caucuses is the fact that the Democrats on a county, state, national level can't do much of anything. Their inaction is beyond compare. So I think if they actually would have to do something to bring an end to the Iowa caucuses, I think the caucuses in Iowa are safe. That's my last take on it. Okay.
Ineptitude is sometimes policy.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, that's a great way to put it. Okay, let me bring. I want to bring this up because we gotta get going here with the doc, as his time is limited, and I want to keep the live stream, if I can, down to maybe less than an hour anyway. But this is the front page of the New York Times. I know the doc reads this every day. And I've highlighted the story here that I wanted to talk about, and it is this fact that the U.S. and Russia now are amassing, well, not the U.S., NATO and Russia are amassing troops along the Ukrainian border here. It's a Mexican standoff. I hope that's not a racist term, but I mean, they're looking at each other across the barbed wire here. Both of them have nuclear weapons. I mean, this is really scary stuff. This article starts off, Putin claims that the U.S. is trying to goad Moscow into war. Yeah. President Vladimir Putin said on Tuesday that the United States was trying to pull Russia into an armed conflict over Ukraine that his government did not want, and signaled he was prepared to engage in more diplomacy, even as he insisted that his counterparts were not. Mr. Putin said he hoped that dialogue will be continued over Russia's security demands, refraining from repeating his earlier threat to take unspecified military technical measures if the West did not comply. Addressing the standoff over Ukraine for the first time since December, and I'd forgotten that, but I guess he and Biden have talked, but Putin has not addressed it since December. Mr. Putin appeared to be trying to dial down tensions slightly in a crisis that has ignited fears of a full-fledged Russian invasion of Ukraine. The Russian president claimed it was the United States that was fanning the flames of war, seeking to goad the Kremlin into action and create a pretext for enacting harsh new sanctions. Officials in Russia, as well as Ukraine, have accused the Biden administration of exaggerating the threat of a Russian invasion, even as the Kremlin has massed, by Western estimates, more than 100,000 troops to Ukraine's southeast and north. Okay, and I want to get the doc's take on this, but the way that I would always put that, Doc, is it's striking to me. Let's say that Russia and its allies were massing troops along the Mexico border, looking into Texas as an example. What do you think would happen? I mean, I know that's maybe not the proper way to look at this, but you got to remember that Ukraine is a former part of the USSR. There are people there that would like to go back. I don't think Putin wants to go down and invade and take all of Ukraine. I think he wants to take back that portion of Ukraine, maybe even that wants to be back in Russia. He wants to protect that Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline to his primary customers in Eastern Europe. And it has memories of the Cuban Missile Crisis all over it and a lot of other things. And I know you've got your own unique perspective on this.
Well, you're right about the Mexico example. You don't have to go to Mexico. You just mentioned Cuba. The Cuban Missile Crisis. When Russia wanted to basically match American missile capability, the Russians did not have ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles, which could be fired from Russia and hit the U.S. in case of a war. So they were very nervous about the United States' ability to basically carry out a first nuclear strike and destroy the Soviet military. So they moved missiles to Cuba, and that made up for the missile gap, because these were intermediate ballistic missiles and short-range ballistic missiles, but they could hit the critical east coast of the U.S. And the U.S. went bananas, and we almost went to war. We put up a blockade. Kennedy sent out the U.S. Navy to stop the Russian ships that were delivering the missiles. There were already missiles in Cuba, which we didn't know about. So you can see sort of, if you put too much military power very close to your competitor or adversary or whatever, they get nervous. And the United States, by inviting East European countries that were once part of the Soviet bloc into NATO and essentially having them on the Russian border, has upset Russia. This current crisis, I think, in some ways, is Putin basically exercising political muscle to show that he's not afraid, that Russia is great, that he is a great leader. It's too cold over there for him to get on a white horse without a shirt and ride, with a sword or an AK-47 in his hand. So moving a lot of Russian troops, by the way, moving those troops also gives them basically military experience, right? I mean, it's like having war games. So, they learn how to come together, how to prepare for war, set up their hospitals, bring their blood supply, learn how to fire their guns better, and the whole logistics thing. So the Russian military already will have benefited from all of this, even if nothing happens, because they were able to exercise the ultimate level of preparedness. And for Putin, he doesn't have to invade Ukraine. He now has gained a lot of nationalism in his country. My argument is this is okay for Putin, challenging Biden, challenging NATO, and saying, look, we're a great world power. Don't mess with us. I would use a different word, but, there are probably some children maybe watching. And the interesting thing is, it's also great for Biden. And the reason it's great for Biden is because if he continues, he can show that he is in favor of a strong American position vis-a-vis Russia, that he is mobilizing troops, that he is reuniting NATO, which Donald Trump trashed and was going to pull the U.S. out of. NATO wouldn't exist without the U.S. And so for Biden, if he does it correctly, I wouldn't be surprised if the tensions get really even stronger, if it would create an upswing in public opinion and support for him and so on. So I'm a kind of a cynic about all of this, that, that it's good for everybody, as long as they don't start shooting each other.
Well, and I'll take it a step further, because I believe who it's really good for are the powers that control these political parties and these politicians. And those powers are the folks that a guy that Doc Schmidt remembers very well warned about. And that's Dwight D. Eisenhower, the military industrial complex. I mean, it ramps up all of that, all of these arms sales.
Yeah.
We got, I think, $1.5 billion moving through the House of Representatives right now, going to the Ukraine. And, probably a couple of $100,000 of that are food rations. The rest of it is going to be big bombs and military stuff, folks. But here, I'm going to play another video clip here, Doc. Now, if people want to know the real reason that we're over there, NATO's over there, and that they're staring across that barbed wire at Russia, let's cue Representative Adam Schiff here in the first impeachment hearing.
These funds, they don't just benefit Ukraine. They benefit the security of the United States. By ensuring that Ukraine is equipped to defend its own borders against Russian aggression. As Ambassador Taylor noted in his deposition, the United States provides Ukraine with radar and weapons and sniper rifles, communication that save lives. It makes Ukrainians more effective. It might even shorten the war. That's what our hope is, to show the Ukrainians can defend themselves. And the Russians, in the end, will say, okay, we're going to stop. That's in our interest. This isn't just about Ukraine or its national security. It's about our national security. This isn't charity. It's about our defense as much as Ukraine's.
Doc, I can say unequivocally, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that that man is either too dumb or he's in on it. And there's reason to believe both. I mean, I've watched him enough to think that he's too dumb. The other part of it is he also is one of the largest recipients of arms defense funds donors as a political candidate there. I mean, this guy is really deep in the military industrial complex. We've got to supply Ukraine. We've got to get involved in all of this to protect ourselves from Russia, Doc, because, and you've heard this your entire life, those damned Russians, they're coming. They've been coming since before I was born. I'm going to put a graphic up here in a little bit. They've been coming since World War I. They've never gotten anywhere. They've never stepped foot on American soil. They never will, but they continue to beat this war drum with Russia. And it sounds like, yeah, it's good for business. It's good for these politicians, as you mentioned, these tensions that we have. But in this 2020 world that we live in, that I talk about on Podcast by George all the time, with us being dead in 20 years because of climate change, or potentially dead in 20 minutes because of a nuclear arms accident. And there have been many over the years. I mean, that's the real danger of this. The tensions, yeah, they're there. But man, if something goes wrong, if something does just by accident, there can be a nuclear winter that would end the whole world. I saw a special. There was something on TV just last night about the doomsday clock. I mean, I think it's down to seconds now. And it's down to seconds because of exactly what's happening in Ukraine. We can kill each other by accident or by design.
Well, you know, we've lived, I mean, you remember duck and cover during the Cold War?
Yes, roll under a desk, yeah.
In Iowa State, in my building, there was this big sign that said nuclear shelter. And, you know, it was the basement of the building. It wasn't much of a nuclear shelter. I wasn't in college in Florida when the Cuban Missile Crisis happened. And, you know, in Florida, nobody has basements because the groundwater is so high. So the best they could do was they put sandbags around the library and put in some crackers and some big cases of drinking water in this college library, so that if nuclear war broke out with the Soviet Union over Cuba during the missile crisis, we could all run to the library, which, you know, we're in Florida there, and it's sunny, and we have a beach house. My fraternity had a beach house. So we've never been to the library. So they had to kind of publish a map. Where is the library at this college? And, you know, we've lived under that for a long, long time. And the Red Scare, as you know, began, as you pointed out, World War I. The immigrants that were all coming from Eastern European countries and Russia were seen as potential enemies and frightening anarchists, and they were bombing people. I mean, those anarchists tried to kill the Attorney General of the United States with a bomb. Yeah. And so we got bananas over that, and the United States basically rounded up and deported over 4,000 immigrants from these communist socialist countries, because we said those people, you know, it's worse than Mexicans now, where, you know, there's all this fear about Guatemalans. And there was a real fear that the U.S. was being essentially undermined by these immigrants. So, you know, those things come in waves. I'm not sure there's much of a anti-Russian wave right now, but, you know, they come. And the truth of the matter, George, sadly, is that Russia does have ambitions to once again become, you know, the greatest power on earth. North Korea has missiles that, unless they are deterred and contained, they're a very big threat. And that's not the American military industrial complex. That's, you know, Kim Jong-un, you know, rattling his missiles. China is expanding into the Pacific. They're probably going to try and somehow reunite Taiwan with the mainland of China the way they did with Hong Kong. So to some extent, the world has been and continues to be a tense place. And the U.S. is the one place, you know, that kind of basically, because it's so powerful and has, you know, a great military, can maybe prevent those countries from overstepping. So I understand what you're saying, and I know that progressives are deadly opposed to the military-industrial complex. But until you can end the Chinese, Russian, North Korean, Iranian hacking complexes, and we can all disarm, you don't go to a shooting party with a wiffle ball. And the world is a dangerous place. The other thing that I saw somebody say was, well, we've lost all these jobs, to China and Bangladesh and other places. Military is still a big job creator in the U.S. Millions of Americans, the defense industry, in all the different aspects of it. So, that's a compelling argument for millions of Americans. And I'm in Key West right now. Key West has a lot of military facilities, naval base, a huge Coast Guard base, an airfield that is constant. You might hear the F-18s flying over because they train here. And of course, we're only 90 miles from Cuba. So Key West is projected deep into the Caribbean. It was used in order to take out the government of Grenada when Castro was building a big international airfield there that would threaten Latin America. So I run into a lot of folks in the Navy and other military services when I take my dog to the dog park here. And, they're nice folks. They're doing a good job for the country. They're here. They're intercepting drug smugglers every single day in massive numbers. And this is the Navy and the Coast Guard, and also the other services. There's a huge balloon that you can't see from where I am right now that is up in the air and has an enormous radar system that can scan the entire Caribbean in order primarily to intercept drug dealers. So, you try to talk in Key West about reducing the military presence, and a lot of people are saying, we need these people, and they're nice people, and they come and eat at our restaurants, and, they're my relatives, some people tell me. So the military-industrial complex, George, is baked into the American society, okay?
Yeah,
and Eisenhower warned against it, but progressives, as you pointed out, just haven't made much progress convincing everybody else that it has to be done away with.
The progressives have been a huge disappointment in Congress. I wanted to get to that today, but I don't think we're going to. I would just say that they apparently believe that their job is to do what Podcast by George does. I think that's what they believe their job is, just to talk to people, to warn people, to get on Twitter, to talk. And we don't. We need action. And I'd say with this military industrial complex, and I've proposed this in the past to convert to green energy. It's going to take our best minds and our most able bodies to be able to do that. And what I'm saying is we've got that in the military. Continue to pay those people, continue to provide them the benefits, but do it with something that'll save the world instead of potentially end it in 20 minutes. Well, let me bring this up because I want to move off of foreign policy here and go back to domestic politics here before we lose you, because this is getting a lot of people have seen this in Yahoo. I got this out of Mediaite, but they just picked it up out of Yahoo. A jaw-dropping poll shows only 17% of Republicans would vote for someone who believes Biden won. Think about that for a second. Holy buckets. Okay, so this goes on to say, belief in former President Donald Trump's insurrection fueling big lie has become a de facto requirement for Republican candidates, according to a jaw-dropping new poll. More than a year after Trump's rally to subvert the results of the 2020 presidential election culminated in a violent and deadly attack on the Capitol, which did not prevent President Joe Biden from taking his rightful office, by the way. Adherence to the false article of faith that fueled it has only grown among Republicans. So let me go back to that headline again. I mean, my God, only 17% of Republicans say, now this is, and I think they kind of screw around with these polls. I'm becoming to believe that more than anything, but they said they would, only 17% would vote for any politician that says they believe that Biden won. I look at that, Doc, and I think, okay, there are people that are telling me that the Republicans are going to steamroll in 2022 and probably also in 2024. Well, the people they're going to steamroll with have to be people that are in that group that don't believe Biden won, and they've got to get on the soapbox and say that. That's the direction that we're heading in. That's how crazy things have gotten and how extreme the Republican Party politicians have to become, if that poll is accurate, if they're going to take office or even retain office. What do you make of that?
Yeah, polls come and go. I'm kind of a skeptic about polls. They've been wrong so many times. I swear, I was just cleaning up my emails, okay? And I was sending out some emails of polls that were saying Hillary Clinton is going to sweep the election and win an astonishing, overwhelming avalanche and become president. Well, how good was that poll? There were a lot of polls that said that Donald Trump had no chance at all of winning. What I'm seeing, George, I'd like to add this, is I happen to be in Florida today, so, let me talk about Governor Ron DeSantis.
Yes.
Ron DeSantis has never addressed the issue of whether Biden won or lost. He's staying away from that. He's going up in the polls. He is the only Republican right now who is a real threat to Trump for the 2024 election. So I'm seeing a lot of Republicans, at the very least, just ignoring the issue. Biden is president right now, and there isn't any great advantage in continuing to say he is not the president. And I'm seeing a lot of Republican leaders sort of essentially, ignore that question and talk about other issues. They may be talking about obscene books, pornography in the schools. They may be talking about prohibiting vaccines that are mandatory in New Hampshire. Here, where I'm in New Hampshire part of the time, the legislature is going to prohibit mandating vaccines for nursing homes at a time when deaths and infections in nursing homes in New Hampshire are skyrocketing. So the Republicans are focusing on those kinds of issues. And I don't know, yes, it looks really grim for Democrats for 2022 in this November for the congressional elections, House and Senate. And Democrats seem not to be essentially starting up the engine and warming it up and filling the gas tank for that. I just don't see any action on the part of Democrats. They're like they were stung by, sleeping sickness mosquito. And in Iowa, it's so interesting. I try to watch it every day. People running against Governor Reynolds and people running against, Senator Grassley. They're not making any noise. They're there. They're bragging about, I've raised $400,000. I've already spent $200 or $300 of that. So what? That doesn't, raising money doesn't get you elected. What gets you elected is fighting and taking on the opponent. And the Democrats don't seem to be very good at that. So I think it's grim for Democrats this year, unless they get themselves organized. And whether or not Biden, Republicans think, but actually independents also think that there was something wrong with some of the election results in the last presidential, the 2020 election. And now there is a concern that voting machines are in fact not very safe. And there is an effort to try to figure out how to make them more robust. I always like the paper ballots. You fill out the paper ballot and you stick it in a box. There was
a paper trail. Yeah.
There was a lot of cheating going on then. I mean, John F. Kennedy supposedly, and there are some who say it's not true, got elected because Mayor Daley in Chicago and Cook County was able to get a lot of dead people to vote for Kennedy, and that gave Kennedy Illinois. So elections are never really 100%, clean and accurate, but they're the best we have. I mean, what do you want? Putin has elections that are completely fictional. The Chinese have elections that are complete fiction. So let's try and make our elections work. And the Democrats are so dumb that they haven't said, well, if the elections of 2020 were bad and there was cheating going on, then the people who got elected on the Republican side also must have gotten elected because Republicans cheated and got all these people elected, right? The Democrats have never made that argument. If the elections were, fraudulent, it wasn't only the voting for Biden that would have been fraudulent. The elections as a whole would have been fraudulent. So I don't understand. I've seen some of the people the Democrats have, as their strategists and so on. They don't seem to be strategizing very well, as far as I can tell. And get a new headquarters in Iowa, not that rundown, mold-infested old building where George almost got run over by a Cadillac. Jeez,
That's exactly right. Well, that always begs the question. I mentioned it earlier. Are they too dumb or are they in on it? I don't know, folks. If I was a Democratic strategist, I would be looking at that third to a half of the electorate that doesn't vote, particularly in off years, but even in the major elections. And I would say, let's give them something. And I mean, I know people don't want to make marijuana illegal. And I know there are people in the Democratic Party that don't want to, wash the slate clean when it comes to educational loans and they don't want to give a minimum wage that's livable and that type of thing. But you've got to ask yourself the question, do you want that other group of people that in that graphic that I brought up, that, 17%, the other part of that party, do you want them coming back into power in 2024? Because if they do, then we're in a 2020 world, I think, for sure. Doc, we've run through a lot of topics here. I mean, and I've kind of controlled the dialogue. Anything in closing on anything that we've talked about that you would like to close with or wrap this up here today?
No, I think, you did a terrific job in choosing some amazing topics that everyone is talking about. But if I were you and others, I would continue looking up.
Yeah, like the movie.
That movie.
I would just get
looking up at the movie. Don't look up is a bad idea. Look up.
That's right. Let's do that.
It's a fun movie. It's a fun movie.
Yeah,
and you have to watch it to the very end.
And I've got to
watch it to you have to watch it to the very, very end.
It's almost too real. Doc, we'll check back in again. It's been too long, pal. I mean, I really like having you on the show. We'll circle back very shortly. Yeah, folks, that's Dr. Stephan W. Schmidt. He's Dr. Politics around the United States, around the world, really. I think we were talking before we came on the air here that he was just contacted by an Eastern Bloc journalist to comment about the situation in Ukraine. I mean, that's how highly regarded he is.
Thank you.
About American politics. And folks, if you like Podcast by George, if you like guests like the good doctor, please go to podcastbygeorge.com. Click on a badge, an icon there, a platform where you would not like to follow us, obviously, but also where you can also subscribe for free. Ring the notification bell as an example on YouTube, and then you get notified when each new episode drops. And of course, on YouTube, if you go directly there, you'll have to put Podcast by George in quotation marks. But if you go to podcastbygeorge.com, just click on the YouTube badge, just on the little icon, the little graphic there, and it'll take you right there. But folks, that is going to do it. That's going to wrap it up. That's all there is. And there ain't no more. That's another podcast by George.